Okay, so we have spent about this, including this lesson, about 4 lessons in the Patriarchs. And as we've stated earlier, the remainder of the book of Genesis actually has to do with the Patriarchs. As we continue through Genesis, we'll continue in our study of the Patriarchs. And that word means what? Father. Okay? And so the father that our patriarch we're talking about tonight is Abraham and Lot. We'll spend most of the time talking about Lot this evening. And so when we talk about Abraham and Lot, what do you think about? What are some of the things that come to mind in connection with those two individuals? Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay. What else, Bill?
The contention between Lot and Abraham.
Okay. And the herdsmen didn't get along and that type of thing, and as a result of that, they went their separate ways. And that really introduces us to what we're going to talk about this evening when we learn about Sodom and Gomorrah. So we have just finished studying the period of time when Abraham looked up and saw these 3 men standing out in the distance, and he ran to them and said, "Come and let a little bit of water be fetched for you so that you can refresh yourself." And he wound up actually doing what for them? Gave them a meal. Yeah, they had the fine choice calf killed and prepared for them. Sarah cooked cakes, or I guess it would be similar to unleavened bread probably, on the hearth, the rocks there at the fire, and they brought milk and butter or curds, and they had a pretty good feast. And so as they begin to talk, continue to speak, Abraham begins to understand that one of these angels, or one of these men, I should say, is the Lord. And as we learn on the end of the study, and even as we begin our discussion tonight, we learn that the other two are what?
Angels.
Angels, that's right. And so the Lord spoke to Abraham, and he told him what was going to happen. And we remember how that Abraham asked the Lord, "Would you slay the righteous with the wicked? And would you spare the city if there were 50 righteous?" And he said, "Yes, for 50 I'll spare it." And they, Abraham kind of bargained with him down to 10 individuals. And he said, "Yes, for 10 righteous people I will spare it." So we come to our study tonight, and we find that the 2 angels arrive at Sodom in the evening. It's getting on toward dark, and where does Lot find himself? Or where do we find Lot? Sitting at the gate. What, if anything, does that indicate?
He was later.
Okay. All right. Important man in the city, somehow or another, a leader, as George has said. And so the elders and the leaders of the city often gathered at the gate and would discuss things throughout the day, and Lot finds himself there in the evening when these 2 angels come in. And so Lot, not understanding who they were, although he was there, he invited them to his house. He showed them hospitality, and this was a very important thing to do in regard to strangers during this period of time, because otherwise they would have had to camp out under the stars, or maybe under the shelter of some lean-to or some other public facility, maybe in the city, but still outside. And so at first they said, "What? We're going to stay outside. We'll just camp out here in the street." And, we talk a lot about blood pressure and that kind of thing today. I can only imagine that Lot's thinking, these 2 men don't know what they're saying. And, if we could have if we could have regulated or registered Lot's blood pressure, it probably would have spiked at that moment. I know mine would have. Because Sodom was an extremely wicked city, as we know and as we've read and studied in the past, and even in preparation for this lesson. But he continued to insist, and so they agreed, and he prepared a feast for them, and they ate. And so sometime after that, the men of the city came to the house. Now, when we talk about the men of the city, what is the Bible specific about in regard to, was it just Lot's neighbors or what?
Bad guys, perverts.
Yeah, but I'm talking about what, not just the character of the men, but maybe the direction or distance from which they came.
So they came from every corner of the city.
Yes, every corner. Yeah, every corner of the city. So in Sodom, evidently, word spread fast. Here we've got two strangers that have come into this foreigner's house, and so they gathered themselves together and they went over there and wanted to have relations, not knowing that these two men were angels. We still really don't know that Lot knows that yet or not, but he's about to know that. And so he went out and said, no, don't do that. They even tried to molest Lot and said, well, here's this stranger who has come in. He's going to be our judge. Have you ever heard anything like that today? Oh, are you judging me? You going to judge me? So that's what, many times what wicked people do. George?
Well, I've heard that the gay community have said that they were condemned because they were not hospitable toward them. I'd say if they came from all corners of the city, they were looking to see what they could do, but it wasn't hospitality.
Right, and that's so, again, I saw something today that had to do with building a straw man. That's what building a straw man is. We're taking the truth, and we're watering it down so much that, it's not even a second cousin to what they really did. And so I don't think that the angel struck them blind because they were not hospitable. And so as a result of that, the angels bring Lot back in and say, hey, stay inside with us. And he struck all the men blind so that they struggled to find the door of the house and that kind of thing. Now, there's one thing I skipped in this story, and what was it? Yes.
Lot offered his 2 daughters.
Okay. All right. Lot offered his 2 daughters. Now, I want to go to page 67. And the third full paragraph from the bottom of the page on the right-hand column where it says Lot went out of the door. Lot went out of the door, closed it after him. He said, I beg of you, brothers, do not behave so wickedly. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want to them, but do not molest these men because they have come under the shadow of my roof. All right, so then let's go over to page 68, and almost the exact same spot on the page. Below the paragraph that talks about the homosexuality of the people of Sodom, it says, when Lot offered his daughters to the mob, it was a heinous thing to do. I think we can agree with that. It illustrates, however, that to him the requirements of hospitality ranked higher than the safety and well-being of one's own family. Also, it shows that Lot did not consider rape to be the abomination that sodomy was. That may very well be true. It's still a heinous thing. in reading this, I have always thought that, and indeed it would have been rape. There's no doubt about that. But I have always thought that Lot was trying to keep these men from committing such a great and heinous crime as sodomy, for which the city was known. And for whatever reason, that was his way of protecting strangers and guests. And probably that's exactly what this paragraph says. But it's still, it just sickens me to think about it. Yeah.
One thing that I've heard taught, and it makes sense, in Romans 1, let me find it back, verse 27. Likewise also the men leaving the natural use of a woman. It was horrible for rape, but it was still within the realm of the natural use of a woman.
Yes.
What they were proposing was not.
Yes.
That was scripture.
Exactly. And also, it shows you a little bit about how women were treated during that period of time and thought of. In living in an area like Sodom, imagine how the women would have been treated there. Now, that didn't make it right. Don't misunderstand me. But at the same time, during this period of time, and even later on, we find women being traded and bought and sold just like slaves, any other kind of slave. And so it would not have been uncommon for a man to buy and sell wives, trade wives, those types of things. And so that, again, a very, very, very sickening thing, sickening time. Ken, you had something you want to say?
Well, yeah, I've always sort of thought that it was a way to just tell him what he thought of him. I know. I mean, I don't know that he knew. I don't know what he knew, but I wouldn't be so. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I don't think they were interested in his daughters.
Right.
And I think he was trying to point out to them that, if you're really going to do something to my daughters, but I know you won't, but leave these guys alone. I mean,
right.
I don't know how much different that makes it, but.
Right, yeah. And you would think, from the standpoint of just being wicked men, that might at least get their attention for a little bit. When he said, I have 2 virgin daughters. And so, but it is just and now we're sitting here and standing here talking about levels of sin. As far as God is concerned, was a rapist any better off than a sodomizer? No.
Disobedient child.
Yeah. And so, I like to leave the scriptures with what they have to say. And I don't want to assume something here, but it was a terrible thing no matter what was done on that occasion. And so the angel struck them all blind. And I think that was good. That they were struck blind. All right, so the angels then tell Lot to flee. He says, do you have anyone here besides, and I'm assuming now that Lot's wife was there. The scriptures doesn't tell us that she was, but we do know that he mentions just his sons-in-law at this time. Do you have anybody here relative to your family, related to your family, other than these? So Lot says, I have 2 sons-in-law. We're about to destroy this place. You need to go and get them out. So he makes an attempt. But what do the son-in-laws have to say about that?
They think he was joking.
Yeah. was a joke. I cannot imagine someone, my elder, coming to me and looking at me with fear on his face for me and maybe my brother-in-law and say, we have got to get out of here now. I can't imagine joking about that. And I just have to wonder if the sons-in-law were not so wrapped up in whatever was going on in Sodom that they just didn't have any interest in leaving. They didn't seem to be. They didn't seem. I'm thinking if I'm wanting to be a faithful follower of God, and I'm seeing this happening here, this situation, I would think, man, now's our chance to get away while we can. Sometimes wealth does funny things to us. And we do know that Lot was very wealthy. I am certain that his sons-in-law would have been. There's been some, question whether or not they were actually married to his daughters or not, since he speaks of them as being virgins. Maybe they were just betrothed, yet they were still considered sons-in-law. And so, whatever the reason, they said, no, we're not going to go. And so Lot labors to get them to leave. To the point that the angels say, listen, you got to go. The next morning, you have got to go. We're fixing to rain fire and brimstone down upon this place. Flee to the mountains. And Lot is afraid to flee to the mountains because he's afraid something's going to happen to him. And so he begs them, let us go to this little city. The little city called Zoar, which actually means little. Let us flee to that place. And so the next morning, the angel sees Lot, his wife, and his daughters as Lot hesitates, and he sends them out of the city. And he says, don't look back. Get out of the valley and go to the mountains. And then Lot begins to beg for them to be able to go to Zoar, the nearby city. He says, it's just a small town. Don't destroy it. It's just a small town. It is a small town, isn't it? So he is able to go there, and the angels tell him to get out, haste, to go there, to hurry, because they could do nothing until he and his family were saved. Now, how many souls at this point in time, right now, what we're talking about right now in this point in time, how many souls are there that make it out of Sodom? How many?
5 to begin with, and one
Okay,
wife
all
got
right.
killed.
So there's Lot, his wife, and his
2 daughters.
2 daughters.
My math is bad.
Okay, so that makes 4, right? Am I right? Okay. Right now, while the angels are grabbing a hold of them and bringing them out of the city and telling them to flee, there's 4 of them. How many had the Lord agreed not to destroy Sodom for?
There were as many as 10.
10. How many would the sons-in-law have made? 6, right? So they're still short. Sodom's going to fall. Sodom's going to fall. And the angels say Sodom is going to fall. Get out of here. And so they go out, and he says, you got to get out of here. We're going to have to get you to safety. And so the point I'm trying to make is, and I just about lost it because I went around the world there. The point I'm trying to make is that because of Abraham's faithfulness, Lot and his family, ultimately just he and his 2 daughters, were saved. And the Scriptures tells us about that. So here is the influence of a righteous man upon God, who enables, that righteous man enables his family, at least part of them, to be saved. So I think that says a lot.
takes you back to James, chapter 5. Has the same thing about the burial rights, smell of ale, such.
Right. That's right. And so the angels reign once they all make it to, or Lot and his two daughters make it to Zoar. The Lord rains fire and brimstone down upon Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, why was it that Lot's wife didn't make it?
She looked back.
She looked back. Okay. In telling, and I think that Brother Waldron mentions this, in telling that don't look back, it's not the idea of not just turning around and see what's happening, is it? It's the idea of having a longing, and, maybe Lot's wife was attached to her future sons-in-law. Maybe she had a friend back there that she was concerned about. Who knows? The Bible doesn't tell us. All it tells us is that she turned around and looked and longed and was turned into a pillar of salt. And that's what Jesus talks about over in Luke chapter 17. And let's just go over to that passage. We'll catch that in our next slide. But go ahead and turn to Luke 17, beginning verse 28. And so the Lord rains fire and brimstone down upon Sodom and Gomorrah and destroyed the cities, the valley, its inhabitants, and the growth on the ground. What kind of area when Lot, we're going back to what Brother Billy said in the introduction, when Lot looked toward the valley, what did he see? Well watered, a great place for his flocks. Not anymore, because all of that was burned up and gone. And so very different, and we noticed the information here in our study material, very different situation between what Lot saw back in Genesis 13 and what has occurred after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And, he said a little bit about, the southern part of the Dead Sea and how that may have had something to do with the location. Don't know for sure, but that, I think, is a point to be made there. Okay, where are we? Luke 28. Yeah, Luke 17, verse 28. Let's go back up to verse 26. Debbie, would you mind reading that, 26 through 32?
And as it was in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sowed, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise, the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Remember Lot's wife.
Good. In the same opening, my Bible, chapter 18 and verse 8, Jesus is talking about the unrighteous judge, and he's using that as an illustration. And verse 8 says, I tell you that he will bring about justice for them speedily. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? And so rather than submitting to what the angels said, and by this time it is painfully obvious that these men are from God. And so rather than submitting to what they said and fleeing and not looking back, Lot's wife turned back. And so Jesus says, don't be longing for this world. And he makes that very clear in speaking not only about Lot's situation, but also Noah's situation. Hey, we were just having a big time. What's this judgment all about? So when the Lord comes back, it will be a different situation. All right, we've already touched on that. The Lord was serious about the command He gave to Lot and his family. All right, so Lot and his daughters made it to Zoar, Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed, and then Lot becomes fearful again. And I can't make sense of this. I don't know why. Probably because, Lot's a man like I am. Just don't make a whole lot of sense. To begin with, he didn't want to go to the mountains. Let's just go to this city over here. I don't know if Lot was thinking that he was going to go back and maybe get his flocks, or I just don't know. I don't know what that situation was. If he tried to carry his flocks to Zoar, the Bible doesn't tell us. But now he's scared to stay in Zoar, so he wants to go to the mountains. Perhaps he thought that he'd carry the blame for Sodom and Gomorrah being destroyed. I don't know how anybody with any sense would think to blame Lot for that, because obviously Lot didn't have that kind of power. But nonetheless, they go and they live in a cave, and the daughters then devise that scheme to become pregnant by their father. And so they caused him to drink so heavily that each one could become pregnant by him, and he drank so heavily that he didn't know when they laid down or when they got up. And that's all I know what to say about that. That is just, first of all, that whole situation is that's as bad as Sodom and Gomorrah, really. But then, how could he be so drunk that he didn't know? I just don't know about that. Anyway.
Now, that shows you maybe the influence the city had on his daughters and his wife.
Yeah, may very well been. So this was done on consecutive nights, and so both daughters became pregnant by their father. The oldest daughter had a son called Moab, the father of the Moabites. The youngest son was Ben-Ammi, the father of the Ammonites. Now he asks us to locate these two cities, and so and I didn't put a slide up with a map on it or anything, but in our mind's eye, where did generally the Moabites reside?
East of the lava beds.
Okay.
A little southeast.
All right, so where would the lava beds be?
To the west, near the Salt Sea, next to the Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay, to the west or to the east?
To the west.
To the west of what?
Of the Ammonites and Moabites.
Yeah, I'm saying, give me a geographical reference.
Below the Arnon River and between the river below there.
Okay, so south, they live between the Arnon and Zered rivers. Then.
Yes.
Okay, so the Moabites lived east of the Dead Sea or Salt Sea, between the Arnon and Zered rivers. Page 56. Okay. Yeah, I know it is, but I'm saying in our mind's eye.
Well, I'll think of as Ruth. She was a Moabitess.
Yeah, right. And so that's where they live. Now, the Ammonites at one time or another lived north of what? Okay. But at the time that we learn about them in the book of Joshua, they have been pushed out of the land, and they live over where?
Mountains east of the Dead Sea and south of the Arnon River.
Okay, all right. So the Ammonites, by the time we meet them later on in the book of Joshua, they are more of a nomadic people. They really don't have a lot of power, a lot of clout so far as a leader is concerned, and so they get pushed around a good bit. Even the Israelites pushed them out. And That's why they were continually a thorn in the side of the Israelites, because they wanted that land. They wanted that land that Og, Bashan, had infiltrated there between the Jabbok and the Arnon. But they were never strong enough to get it. So anyway, that's good. I appreciate your comments about that. All right, so that brings us then to Genesis chapter 20, and I'm just going to touch on a little bit of that. We don't have a whole lot of time left. But Abraham leaves the Oaks of Mamre, which is later known as what city? That's right, Hebron or Hebron, either one. And he travels south, eventually landing in Gerar, or Gerar. What city, what people lived in that area later on? The Philistines, that's right. And so we're talking about from the southern portion of the land, let's just say, in our mind's eye, let's think about the Dead Sea. So would that be east or west of the Dead Sea? West, okay.
About almost in the ocean.
All right, and so would it be east or west of the Mediterranean?
It'd be east of the Mediterranean.
Okay, so it's in that general area. So that's where Abraham goes. Now, at that point in time, there's a king there by the name of Abimelech. And Abimelech may mean, my father is a king, or I am the father of a king. And generally speaking, most people agree it's a title that means my father's a king. Anyway, it refers to Abimelech as being a king. And he took Sarah to wife because Abraham told the king she was his sister. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah, it does. Sounds like a repeat.
Pharaoh had this same situation, and the Lord came to Abimelech in a dream and said, "Behold, you're a dead man." And it's clear by what Abimelech says that he really doesn't know that this is Jehovah. He's thinking that this is someone that's greater than he is, but not necessarily Jehovah, because he refers to him as Lord from the standpoint of Adonai. And that just means someone who might be a master. And so the Lord tells him, you've taken a man's wife. And he said, "Lord, will you slay a nation?" He told me she was his sister. She told me she was his sister. And so he pleaded with God about that, and he says, "Out of the integrity and innocency of my heart, I did this thing." And the Lord says, I know it was out of the integrity of your heart you did this. That's why I kept you from having her. And so a little commentary later down in the further portion of the chapter tells us about this situation where the Lord kept Sarah from him. At this same time, what was happening in the king's house, and maybe even in the city altogether, with the men and the women. They were all barren. All women were barren. He had stopped, closed the womb of the women. And so, Brother Waldron suggests that this may have had something, there may have been some kind of physical situation there that God cursed them with. I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us. Whatever it was the Lord intervening for Abraham and Sarah. And then the Lord turns around, and what does he call Abraham? Remember? He calls him a prophet. He said, "This man is a prophet, and he, the one who has wronged you, will pray for you." I don't much understand that either. But I do know that Abraham was telling a portion of the truth, because he told Abimelech, he said, she really is my sister. She's the daughter of my father, but not of my mother. Did I get that right?
Sounds good.
All right, so that tells us that God will hear Abraham's prayer, but Abraham has to pray for Abimelech, because Abimelech's not like Melchizedek. Abimelech evidently is not a faithful man to God. And so he has Abraham pray for him. And Abraham, again, is really blessed by God in this situation, because Abimelech gives him, flocks, he gives him servants, he gives him 1,000 pieces of silver. He makes a point of telling Sarah, I've given your husband 1,000 pieces of silver to rectify this situation, to right my wrong. So God really intervenes here and is able to keep sin from occurring because of this half-truth that Sarah and Abraham have told. But going back to Abraham and Abimelech's conversation, Abimelech says, why have you done this? What have you encountered that you have done this thing? And so he tells Abimelech this story. Ever since we left where we grew up, I asked Sarah to, whenever we go into some place strange, just tell them I'm your brother. That way they won't kill me. And that's what he tells them. And he said, because I surely felt that the presence of God is not, or the fear of God is not in this place. And so that gives us a little more of an indicator about how Abimelech and his people lived. So they planned that, and that's what they told at least twice. May have been more than twice, but at least twice. And, there's a possibility that Abimelech is taking this woman who is 90 years old as, a political, something or another. I don't know exactly what you
Sort of like Solomon did with all of his wives and his concubines.
Yeah, just to make things, here this Abraham's a great man, and so Abimelech wants to be a confederate of his. So we talked about the sheep, the oxen, the male and female servants, the 1,000 pieces of silver, and Abimelech says, my land is before you, stay anywhere you want. And so Abimelech prayed to God, and God restored Abimelech's people. And they were able to have children once again. So, if we talk about drama in people's lives today, that's some drama right there, isn't it? And those two stories. That's some drama. So we really don't know anything new. But the fact that God watched after his people, watched after Abraham, and got him to do what he did for Abimelech is just so interesting to me. And it shows that God is using Abraham to fulfill his promises. Any comments or questions before we do? Okay, Murphy and then Bill.
Jeremy, at least in the King James Bible, in verse 4, said, but Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? I'm wondering on what basis could Abimelech have said that they were a righteous nation on that kind of...
I would think only from the standpoint that he hadn't sinned with Sarah.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking now. It may not be correct, but he was certainly not righteous to the extent that he could have prayed to God himself,
Right.
and God removed the curse.
Right.
All right, Billy and then George.
On Genesis 19:14, could you look at that for a minute
All right.
and please clarify my confusion?
wind up verifying my confusion. All right, and Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who were to marry his daughters and said, Up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city. But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be jesting. That's the New American Standard.
Well, mine says, the New King James, it says, who had married his daughters.
Okay.
And I'm confused. He had 2 at home with him. Did he have 2 more daughters?
Not according to those that were able to get out. I don't know. There's a possibility there, but so there's a little bit of confusion from the translation of one text to the other. So I don't know for sure.
Now, well, the facts that they're called sons-in-law, if that meant in that day what it means today, it would mean that they were married to his daughters, and evidently he had more than 2. If he had 2 virgin daughters, you would assume in almost any culture that they would be very young, ladies, teenagers.
It's a possibility. But you know, they also, and that's what I mentioned earlier, they also considered those that were engaged to be sons-in-law and daughters-in-law. So I don't know, but there's a possibility. George.
I'm just going to say that at the urging of Lot, the sons-in-law wouldn't go out, and you would think that the people in the city would be responsive. But in the days of Noah, he preached over 100 years, and they still didn't listen.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Okay, thank you so much for your attention and your time this evening.
Mark in your psalm book to number 304. 304. Then turn to number 237. 237. Brightly beams our Father's mercy from the lighthouse evermore. But to us He gives the keeping of the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save. Dark the night of sin has settled, loud the angry billows roar. Eager eyes are watching, longing for the lights along the shore. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor fainting, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save. Train your feet, pull out, my brother. Some poor seaman, tempest tossed, trying now to make the harbor in the darkness may be lost. Let the lower lights be burning, send a gleam across the wave. Some poor weak, struggling seaman, you may rescue, you may save.
It's good to see everyone out this evening. Another wonderful day the Lord has blessed us with. So I'm going to share with you for just a few moments before we depart what's been on my mind lately. And I was laughing because Shane Peck, when he came Sunday, said the same thing. I'm not thinking of anybody in particular. This is a lesson that I needed to hear. And in the same way, what's been on my mind and on my heart, I want to share with you all. Maybe we can all benefit from this together. Anybody ever heard the term or said the phrase, hey, there's a new work starting over in Gadsden, or I heard there's a new work starting somewhere else? I think we've all understand what that means. And I was thinking to myself, why do we use that term? There's a work. And I'm thinking, what are we doing? What is the work? What are we talking about? We also sing songs. We sing, do the work, or help me out. There's a couple more.
We'll
work till Jesus comes. So the idea of working is nothing new to us. And so once again, it got me to thinking about myself and thinking, am I working? I want to make sure I'm working. Also, doing some research, I came across this. And when I'm studying, I'll go to many versions of the Bible. On my app, I can hit compare, and it'll bring 5 or 6 different versions up. And sometimes I'll like CEV. Sometimes I like it. It kind of relates to my brain. Or sometimes it makes me think that's how I would explain it to my children or to somebody at work. Instead of preaching Old King James, thous and these, really in practical communication, you might give an example. Well, do you know how such and such? And in those terms. Also, I will Google and see what other ideas are out there. And you've done this, I'm sure you have. You get an array of ideas from different beliefs, different types of people that just believe things that I have no idea where they came from. Well, I ran across this AI description, and I said, what? Why is it as a work? And this is what I found. Because it is a living organism engaged in the ongoing process of fulfilling Christ's mission within a specific geographical area. The term emphasizes the active, intentional, and dynamic nature of the congregation's ministry, contrasting it with a passive institution or building. Again, the idea of it's not a building, church isn't a building. One thing I found that really struck me, I'll find the right one here. One of them really almost offended me, and I thought, wow. Well, if I can find it, I had it right here. Isn't that something? The idea was a church is called to be a visible. That's not the one. The idea was if people are just assembling and they're not following what Christ said to do, then they're just a group of people getting together and having a good time. And that really made me think, wow, does that mean? Is that all I'm doing? Am I punching the clock for 3 hours on Sunday? Am I punching the clock for an hour in the middle of the week on a Wednesday night? And then I go back to life? Or is being a Christian life, maybe you draw a big circle. This is Scott's life, and there's parts of Scott's life. And way over here on the side, that's church life. And so I want to make sure, when I start looking at myself, that I'm not caught in that. And sometimes over the years, I've kind of felt that way. Distant, kind of get busy in life, and it happens. The next thing you know, you feel like you're maybe going through motions. And we want to be aware of that. Tonight in our class with the kids, we talked about the deceptiveness of the devil. And the Bible talks about him being a schemer. And looking like an angel and all these things. You know, he doesn't kick in the door and have horns. It's always done a different way. And so when I was starting to examine myself, that was part of what I was thinking about tonight, is I really need to examine myself, and perhaps we all do. And so my thoughts for tonight for us to take home for the week, and I encourage us all to maybe take a look at that at some point within the week. And I don't know what you're all doing in your spiritual personal lives, and so this may not apply to you, but I know that it's a good idea anytime we examine ourselves. Sometimes you may have heard me pray when we pray together. I'll ask God for the courage. Give us courage, because it can be very difficult to be honest and look in that mirror, proverbial mirror, and judge ourselves. You know, nobody wants to do that. I mean, I can put together a list of things for each one, hand it out and say, here, I've been noticing this is what you need to work on. No, it doesn't work that way. I need to look at me, and you need to look at you, and we all need to look at the reflection of the Word and make sure we have a match. So that's where we're at tonight. It's talking about what is a work, and am I involved in it? And do I have the courage or the desire to examine myself and see if I'm in a work? If I'm in a work, what's my job in this work? And you start thinking about relating that to worldly jobs. If you ever owned a company, there's only one reason you hire somebody. It's because you're trying to get work done. And if they can't do that, you really don't have any use for them, right? If I hire a delivery guy for my furniture store, and either he doesn't show up or he breaks all the furniture, I can't really, you're not a help. You're not part of the work, right? And so I want to be careful to mix spiritual work with physical work, but I think you can see my meaning that we have a role to play, if you will. And so what I want to encourage everybody to do this week is think about the work here. Is it a work? Am I working? And take a look at ourselves. Let's look over at Revelation 3. We're familiar with this. The churches in Asia. Chapter 3, verse 14 is the message to Laodicea. It says, to the angel of the church in Laodicea write, the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of creation of God, says this, I know your deeds, that you are neither cold nor hot. I wish that you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Because you say I am rich and I have become wealthy and have need of nothing, and you do not know that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. I advise you to buy from me gold refined by fire, so that you may become rich, and white garments so that you may clothe yourselves, and that the shame of your nakedness will not be revealed. And eye salve to anoint your eyes so that you may see. And this is key for 19. Those whom I love I reprove and discipline. Therefore be zealous and repent. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him. I will dine with him, and he with me. He who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit down with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. If we do find that maybe we're not working in the work, we need to make some changes in our lives. We're being watched. God sees all these things, and there's a standard that needs to be upheld. So that's it. Simple message before we depart. I encourage you to look inside yourselves, look to what it means to be a work. Make sure that's what we're doing here. We don't want to be the lukewarm church for certain. See what more we can do. Now, before we depart, we always want to offer an opportunity for anyone. Don't go home with a hard heart. Don't go home with a burden on your heart. Anytime we're together, we want to offer this opportunity for prayers, to work with you, to study with you. And if there's a public sin in your life, clear it out tonight. Wipe the slate clean. Again, in our class tonight with the young people, we talked about some ideas of what it meant when you come up out of the waters of baptism, this washing away and being clean and free of. And you can have that tonight if you don't. So before we depart, please come forward. In a moment, we're going to stand and sing. We'll pray for you. and you can go home better tonight. Come if you need help tonight.
Why do you wait,
Dear brothers, oh why do you tarry so long?
Your Savior is waiting to give you
A place in his sanctified throne. Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now? Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now?
What do you hope, dear brother,
To gain by a further delay. There's no one to save you but Jesus. There's no other way but his way. Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now? Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now?
why do you wait, dear brother?
The harvest is passing away. Your Savior is longing to bless you. There's danger and death and delay. Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now? Why not? Why not? Why not come to him now?